Welcome back to the program. Residents of an apartment complex in Sydney remain in limbo after they were forced to evacuate their homes due to structural damage. It's the second such incident in 6 months, and it has the New South Wales state government reassessing building laws.
Preparing for their fourth night away from home, residents of Sydney's Mascot Towers want answers.
At this stage, we don't have nowhere to go. So the only option is to keep trying to call the building management and just wait for a return.
They were ordered to leave their units on Friday night, with engineers concerned cracks in the primary support structure and the facade masonry were widening. Temporary structural support was urgently installed, but much of the building is still deemed unsafe. Half the residents of the 122 units allowed to enter briefly to collect their personal belongings, the others forced to wait at least a week. Owners' rights advocates say since the building is 4 years past its 6-year warranty, apartment owners could be forced to foot the hefty bill for structural building repairs. The New South Wales Premier is ensuring residents they will be looked after.
As soon as the emergency service personnel have left the premises, our fair trading people can move in and then ensure that everybody's rights are being respected and that everyone's being supported during the process.
It's the second time in 6 months a Sydney apartment complex has been evacuated. Last December, hundreds of residents were forced out of the Opal Tower in Sydney Olympic Park. Now the government is promising changes will be made, starting with the appointment of a building commissioner.
We announced after the Opal Tower issue some months ago major overhaul of the building industry in New South Wales. That means hauling in the certified process. It means giving more rights to people living in strata buildings, and we anticipate that legislation will hit Parliament in the next session. So the government's been doing extensive consultation with the industry. We want to lead the nation in this regard.
Christy Kulcher, Sky News.
For more on this story, I'm joined live by Chris Knierim. He's the president of the Building Designers Association of Australia. Chris, thanks for your time today. What has to happen now?
Thank you. Well, the most important thing is that everybody remains calm in a situation like this. I know it's very difficult, but it's really important that everyone remains calm and allow the engineers to go in and really assess the extent of the damage, and then take it from there, I guess, because a lot of people are wanting answers now, but they're not going to be able to get the answers. People really need to do these stringent tests and be able to then go through and provide an answer, a solution to how the building can be rectified to allow the residents to re-enter their premises.
So, of course, until authorities do that, we don't know what the problem is yet. These residents need answers, so how long can they expect that process to take?
Well, that's difficult to answer. It's not for me to answer. That's up to the engineers to answer that. But all I can say is that people do need to remain calm, allow the relevant authorities to go in and assess the building, and once the assessment's made, they'll be able to then provide an answer. I know it's very, very difficult for these displaced families, but I can assure you the safety is paramount for all the people involved.
As we just heard there in that report, of course, this isn't the first incident within the past 6 months or so. We had the Opal Tower last year. So is this a widespread problem with buildings in Sydney or across the country? Do we need any changes in legislation to ensure that things like this aren't happening in the future?
Look, our association, the BDAA, have been invited and have been speaking regularly with ministers within the government and other leading industry bodies. There is definitely change coming. A reform is definitely going to happen. I can assure you that a reform is going to happen because it actually needs to happen. We can't sit back and rest on, and remain going in the same direction we have, because, these things can, eventuate and continue. And we want to ensure that everybody is safe and that these buildings themselves are also safe. And, perhaps what we should be doing is getting the stratas to rethink about their stratas. Have a look at, instead of just getting a pest inspection done, periodically, how about we get an engineer to go periodically to go and inspect these buildings to ensure the safety of the residents.
And I guess then it comes into cost. Who would need to burden the shoulder of that cost? Is it the residents who did purchase this property in particular? Was built 10 years ago, so it's not like it's a new build.
No, look, again, that's not for me to answer who's going to cover the costs, but I think, that for the costs going forward, I mean, for that building, I understand that there's going to be, possible legal ramifications, but they have to come down to the cause of they have to come down to see what the cause of the cracking is, whether it was building related or whether it's perhaps from other associated works in nearby properties that have caused the cracking. Nobody really knows at this stage. But, going forward in future, I think it's important that they have independent bodies going through and assessing these buildings to ensure that all these buildings, are structurally sound.
In that package we played just before your interview, Gladys Berejiklian said that she is going to appoint a commissioner, and there are legislative changes that are coming, and she also wants to make sure that all of those residents are assisted if and when they do get back into their homes. Does that ease your mind at all, or is there further change in this space that needs to happen?
Yes, look, there is further change. In 2017, there was an assessment made on the building industry, and a report was put out known as the Shergold-Weir report. In the report, there was 24 recommendations, for the construction industry, and recommendation number 1 was regarding practitioners, and that was registration of all practitioners. That's in engineers, architects, building designers, and so forth. And this is a real key point. To me, this is what number one recommendation should be, the number one point put through, because it's making these people accountable. Currently, people don't even need PI insurance to practice, and I think it's ridiculous. Consumer need to be confident in the sector, and to do this, we need to make sure that we have people accountable for their actions.
I think accountability is the big thing here, as you say, because now we're all talking about compensation for these residents. And at the moment, if you buy a product from a store and you take it home and it's faulty, you get a refund. But how do you know that you're getting what you've paid for when you're buying something off the plan? I guess having that accountability and having that registration would try and alleviate any of those problems in the future.
Yeah, look, that would make a massive, massive difference to the construction industry alone, and that's just one of 24 points or recommendations. The other thing is that we have to look at when people are purchasing a property, when you've got a high-rise or you've got a residential home, they fall under different warranties. So, people need to be stringent and really do their research about the warranty and how they're covered before purchasing a building.